Hi again. This time we'll be talking about basic material management. But first, let's figure out what is this strange scene that you can see here if you go to your material preview tab in the viewport shading. Uh, this light here is actually what is known as an HDR light, which means high definition range. It is an image, a spherical image that is around your scene, and with this you can see how the object would look if it had materials and it was in a natural lighting environment. Sometimes you don't want to see this, and if that happens, you can go to your drop-down menu, the shading drop-down menu, and in here you can see world opacity. So if you drag that down, you will no longer see the light and the colors from the scene, the forest that you were seeing just now, and you can bring it back up to 100% if that's what you want to see. And you can set the rotation of the lighting if you want in a different way. But I have to say that I haven't really used this that much. It's just a nice way of getting some color to your scene, or actually the environment when you are working on a scene. But for now, let's work with the world opacity turned off, and I will show you how to do basic materials. Now, your material tab is this one here called Material Properties. When you click on that, you will be shown the name of your object that is selected, and then you have the option to click on New, and this will give you a new material. Now, you can work with this here in the Properties tab. You can make the base color something. Pick on a nice blue one, or maybe let's take a nice green one for this. And you can set most of your options in here directly. And if you want to, you can make your object really, really highly defined in the sense that how it should look. The roughness is an indication of how much your object will reflect light that it gets. IOR is used when you have a glass material, and a alpha channel is the transparency of the surface. So if you drag that down, you will see that it actually doesn't do much at the moment. But when you drag it down, you can see how it becomes more and more transparent. So value 1 is that it's not transparent at all, and with value 0, you don't see anything. 0.1 is slightly transparent. So this is one way of doing your transparency. But for now, I need to explain the surface. To work with materials, Blender has to use a thing called shader. And you can see that there are multiple numbers of shaders. Diffuse means that your object is not reflecting much. Emission means your object is actually emitting light. Glass means that it looks like glass. Glossy is, as it says, it's glossy. Hair, hold out, mix. All of these different shaders have different uses. For example, the toon is used when you want to give your objects like the kind of manga or anime look. That's when you can use the toon BDSF shader. So you need to know which kind of use or which kind of object you are going to make. If you're making a book or something, then you can use a diffuse shader. Or if you are making a glass, like a pint of beer, then of course your object needs to be glass so that you can see the beer inside your object. But let's resume this by moving this object up one GZ1, oops, GZ1, and then add another object, plane, scale it by 100, like so. And then we go back to the preview. And now I'll pick my plane, call it floor, and give the floor a nice blue material. So now what we have is a green cube and a light that we can put down here, and we can turn the light up maybe to 2000 watts, slightly more. And this is how it looks in the render view. Let's put the lamp somewhere like that. I'll actually GY a little more. That's a good place. GX. Okay. Now, if I click on the blue floor, you can see that its roughness is now set at 0.5. If I drag down to 0, then it doesn't really reflect, but of course the light is more intense right below it. And if I turn the roughness up again and make it like 0.7, you'll see that it actually is reflecting more light. So the roughness is used to set how diffuse the reflection is. If it's 0, then you can actually see the lamp down here, and this is fully reflective. And if it's 100 or 1, then there is no reflection of the lamp itself at all. To do the same in here, I will go and change the surface shader to glossy and make the color green. And if I now move the lamp there and change the roughness to something like 0.1, you can see that it actually reflects my lamp pretty well. And if I leave the lamp in there, move in with the Y direction, Z direction a little, and then we go and see closer. I click on this and I make the roughness even less. You can see that it's reflecting it all. There are a lot of different settings that you can change, and they all have some applications in some high-end material management things, but for your basic use, setting something as glossy is just all you actually need. I will leave that as half reflective and move the lamp away a little more and go up a little as well. So, okay, now we can experiment with the cube. If I was to make it a glass shader, it is going to turn into a glass object. And if I now add a ball, let's add a UV sphere, make it slightly smaller, and give that material a emission shader. It means that the ball, which is down here, is going to start to emit light. Yep. So if I take this object in here and I move the ball inside the cube, which of course I can do by snapping. I can select this, snap the cursor to the selection, then select this, snap selection to cursor, And now I go into my render preview. I should actually see something here, which I don't. But now that we have the emitting ball inside the cube, we can see that if we press Z and we go to wireframe, we can see that the ball is really inside the sphere, the cube. Go back to solid and then change the render engine to cycles. And now you will see how the ray tracing actually works when we go to rendered. So we have a glass cube, and inside the glass cube we have the white ball. If I click the sphere and I turn on more power in the emission, like 100, then I turn off the lamp, you can see that the cube is now nicely emitting light. And the color of the light is white, but I can turn that into red if I need. And now the ball inside the cube is actually emitting a red light. But of course, because the cube is now green, it doesn't show. But if I make that material slightly different, and I will move the sphere on the y-axis, you will see that its color is white, but that's because the strength is so big. It doesn't show. Now you can see that it's a red light. So this would be a basic way of setting up your material. And if you need to delete the material, it's easy enough by just clicking on the minus button here, and it will then have no material. And you can see that it's doesn't have any material at the moment. And if you go back to your Eevee render engine, you will see that the other one has material and this one doesn't have anything. Okay, so let's do something different now, and we can try to use a checker material. So I'll go back to my materials, delete this one, and go into new. And when I go into the base color and I click on this little dot in here, I can see all kinds of different textures that I can give to my cube. I can make it into a big texture, a checker texture, environment, image texture, magic, noise. All of these are different types of procedural materials that you can use. And procedural means that they are produced by mathematical formulas, and if you scale your object, the things will scale on their own, and you don't have to do anything about them. But there's also one here called checker texture, and when you turn it on, you get your base color is checker texture, and you can change the colors. If you want to make it white and red, you can do it like so. And well, this is sometimes useful for different types of test cubes, for example, for scaling. You can make that scale different. And there are a lot of different things in here that you can do to edit your object. You can make it into a glass object, which doesn't actually make much use of your texture, so it doesn't make much point in trying to do that. So let's not make it. Let's make it a diffuse with the checker texture, red and white. And now we can go into the shading tab, and this will show you how this thing is actually made. This is the node system that we are using. This is the object that has 3 nodes. It has to have a material output node, otherwise you won't see your object. If I delete that, your object it does exist, but it doesn't show. Even if you render it, it doesn't show because it doesn't have a material output node. To add any nodes, you always do the same as in Blender, Shift A. This one is an output node, material output node, and then you connect the BDSF node with the surface node, and we're back in business. There are a multitude of things you can do with your nodes. For example, you could add a node in here to change the size of the checker texture. To change the texture on this object, we will need 2 more nodes. Move these out to the side a little. We need a vector node called mapping, because this is the thing that is going to change the properties of the texture regions in here. And we need another one called in the input nodes called texture coordinate. This one here takes the object, takes the geometry of the mesh, and is then used to tell the texture what kind of object the texture is on. So if I take the generated node and lead it out to the connector called vector, and then I take the vector and lead it in here into the vector input, the object is exactly the same because it is getting the texture coordinates from the object, putting them to the mapping where everything is the same, 1, 1, 1 for the scale, 0, 0, 0 rotation and location. So if I now go and I change the x into 2 and the y into 2, I will have double the amount of checks here. I can also move the location of the texture on the object, and if I want to, I can rotate it on the different values. And of course, this is mostly a mess. It doesn't look very nice, but you will find that you will need to do quite a lot of this scaling of your textures on your objects. The other options here on the texture coordinate thing are UV. This is basically the same thing, but it expects that you have done UV unwrapping on your object before you use this. The object and the generated are more or less the same. Let me make that into 0 again so it looks nice. 1 and 1 and 1. So this is where we started from. There is a slight difference between generated and object, but you'll learn how to use which one of these to use whenever you need to do that. So the chain goes like this: texture coordinates, this is the object's physical properties taken to the mapping node, into the checker texture, and into the diffuse BDSF, and through that, this is the one that creates the actual image here, and then the material output will show what the chain of nodes has done. And next, I will show you how to use an image for your object texture. To show you another example of how to attach a material to a mesh, let's try to make a billiard ball. Let me delete the ball first because we need to create it from scratch. So I will take a UV sphere, and to make it look nicer, I'm going to use a subdivision surface modifier, and use the viewport so that I have like double or triple, so that it actually looks like smooth. Then I go to the material tab, create a new material. This time I'm going to use not a principled BDSF, but a glossy shader, like so. And now it's going to be glossy all the way. And with the roughness, I can make it less or more glossy. But to get the billiard ball 15 to be in there, the color connector here, you can see that the color is always telling you what kind of object you can connect to it. A shader can only be connected to the surface or the volume. If you had a the volume node, you would be connecting that to the blue displacement. Also, vectors go into the blue nodes, and then there's a gray node for some other stuff. So let me create a node, an input node called texture. Sorry, a texture and an image texture. I will connect the color to the color, and again there is no image, so we will have to go and open an image. I'll paste here a link to my nodes. Here is a pre-made image that is called 15, and as you can see, it doesn't need to have any other stuff changed in here. And I can rotate this around the Z value here. And you can see that it looks pretty nice. Yep. And if I take down the roughness, it's going to be even more reflective. So if I move the lamp a little, you can appreciate how the material shines pretty nice. And to make it look even better, I would of course need to go back to the object and the modifiers and make it even more sharply divided. So that's how you would attach a single image to a glossy shader and connect that to the material output. Now there's going to be a different video on how to create a book. I have 6 images of a book, and I will be showing how to UV unwrap the object. And then UV unwrapping means that we take an object and we take all the surfaces out of that and we will place them on a flat surface so we can add some image to it and then rewrap the UV unwrap back on top of the object. That wasn't done here because we don't need to do that. This is a simple object. But when you have a more complex object, that's when you need to actually do a UV unwrapping on this. Let's see how it looks in cycles. It looks almost metallic. This is way too glossy. It doesn't have to be like reflecting like that. But now it looks pretty much like a billiard ball would. Maybe a little more glossy, like so. Right, but we will see that when we do the UV unwrapping.